Most men fail at sexual tension for one reason. They think attraction is created by talking about sex. It's not. Attraction is created by making someone feel emotionally safe enough to want to talk about it themselves. And the irony? The harder a man tries to steer the conversation towards sex, the less sexual he actually appears. Because women are not just listening to your words on a first date, they're scanning for pressure, neediness, social awareness, emotional control. And within minutes, they can tell whether you're dangerous, desperate, or deeply attractive. Here's the twist. The men who get women talking openly about intimacy on a first date rarely force the topic. They create the conditions where it naturally happens. So the real question is, why do some conversations feel awkward and creepy, while others somehow become deeply flirtatious without either person planning it? That's what we're unpacking today. By the end of this video, you'll understand the psychology behind sexual conversation on first dates. Not pickup lines, not manipulation, not weird alpha male tricks. You'll learn how emotionally intelligent men create chemistry in a way that feels relaxed, mature, and mutually exciting. Because here's what relationship psychology consistently shows. People open up sexually when they feel three things simultaneously: safety, curiosity, and emotional tension. Miss one of those, and the conversation dies. But when all three are present, even a simple dinner date can suddenly shift into hours of playful, intimate conversation that neither person wants to end. And once you understand why that happens, your entire dating life changes. A guy sits across from a woman on a first date. Within 20 minutes, he says something like, "So, are you adventurous?" Or worse, "What's your biggest turn on?" He thinks he's building tension, but what she feels is pressure. Because psychologically, forced sexual conversation activates social defense mechanisms, her brain stops asking, "Do I feel chemistry?" and starts asking, "Why is he rushing this?" That shift kills attraction instantly. Now compare that to another man. He's relaxed, present, curious. He's not trying to impress her with confidence. He's making her feel comfortable expressing herself. And strangely enough, that's what creates sexual energy, because attraction grows best in emotional freedom. Here's the practical shift. Stop asking sexual questions directly. Instead, ask emotionally revealing questions that naturally allow flirtation to emerge. Questions like, "What's something people misunderstand about you when they first meet you?" Or, "What kind of energy instantly makes you feel comfortable around someone?" Notice the difference? You're not interrogating her sexuality. You're creating emotional depth. And depth often becomes flirtation naturally. The biggest mistake men make is assuming sexual tension starts in the body. It usually starts in the nervous system, and that leads to the next point. A woman once described a date like this: "I knew within 10 minutes I could talk to him about anything." That sentence matters more than most men realize. Because when women feel psychologically safe, their conversational filters relax. Not because they're easy, because they're human. Research in attachment psychology shows people become more open, playful, and expressive when they feel emotionally accepted instead of socially evaluated. That's why judgment kills chemistry. A lot of men unknowingly create pressure by reacting too intensely when a woman says something flirtatious. She makes one playful joke, and suddenly he lunges emotionally toward it, too excited, too eager, too much. Now she pulls back. Why? Because emotional pacing matters. Sexual conversation is like dancing. If one person suddenly speeds up too aggressively, the rhythm breaks. So instead, practice emotional steadiness. If she teases you, smile. Stay grounded. Don't overreact. If she mentions relationships or intimacy, don't suddenly transform into a horny teenager. Respond calmly, like a man who's comfortable with sexuality, not starving for it. That emotional self-control communicates maturity, and maturity is deeply attractive, especially to emotionally intelligent women. Here's where most men misunderstand flirting. They think sexual tension comes from explicit words, but real tension usually lives in implication. Subtext, eye contact, tone, timing. A woman says, "You seem trouble." And instead of replying with something crude, You smirk slightly and say, "Only around people who bring it out of me." See what happened there? Nothing explicit, but emotionally, the energy shifted. This works because the brain is more stimulated by anticipation than certainty. Psychologists sometimes call this the gap effect. The mind becomes more emotionally engaged when it fills in missing information itself. That's why mystery feels magnetic. So instead of making conversations graphic, make them layered. Playful ambiguity is powerful. You can talk about travel, personality, relationships, even childhood stories, and still create chemistry through emotional tone. And here's another secret. Women often introduce sexual topics indirectly first, not with explicit comments, but with questions like, "Have you always been this confident?" Or, "I feel like you've dated a lot." Those are not factual questions, they're emotional probes. She's testing your comfort with intimacy, confidence, and tension. If you become defensive or overly serious, the flirtation collapses. But if you stay relaxed and playful, the conversation deepens naturally. Here's something counterintuitive. The men women describe as safe are often the same men they describe as sexy. Not because those men are passive, but because emotional safety reduces anxiety, and anxiety suppresses attraction. Think about that for a second. A woman is far more likely to flirt openly with a man who makes her feel emotionally relaxed than with a man trying hard to appear sexually dominant. That changes the entire game, because suddenly attraction stops being about performance and becomes about presence. Now let's go deeper. One of the fastest ways to make a conversation weird is this. You say something flirtatious, then immediately look for validation. Did she laugh? Did she blush? Did it work? That needy energy creates tension in the worst way. Confident flirting is detached from outcome, not cold, not robotic, just emotionally unforced. Imagine two men saying the exact same line. One says it nervously, hoping she approves. The other says it playfully, without needing anything back. Completely different emotional experience. Because people don't just respond to words, they respond to emotional intent. And women are exceptionally good at detecting hidden pressure. So when you flirt, let it breathe. Don't stack joke after joke after joke trying to force chemistry. Allow silence sometimes. Hold eye contact 1 second longer. Let moments land emotionally. That's what mature seduction actually looks like. Not constant performance, but emotional patience. And here's the paradox. The less desperate you are to make something sexual happen, the more naturally sexual the interaction often becomes. This is the deepest point in the entire video. Most women have experienced men trying to get somewhere, trying to impress, trying to escalate, trying to engineer attraction. And after enough experiences like that, women become incredibly sensitive to being psychologically managed. So if your entire focus is secretly, "How do I make this turn sexual?" she'll feel it, even if you hide it well. But when a woman feels genuinely understood as a person, something changes emotionally. She relaxes into authenticity, and authenticity is where real intimacy begins. A lot of first dates stay surface level because both people are performing versions of themselves, but emotionally intelligent men create conversations that feel human instead of strategic. For example, instead of trying to sound impressive, ask questions that reveal emotional reality. What's something you miss about being younger? What kind of connection do you think is rare today? What makes someone emotionally attractive to you beyond looks? These questions do something powerful. They shift the interaction away from transactional dating energy and toward emotional intimacy. And once emotional intimacy exists, sexual conversation no longer feels random. It feels connected, natural, earned. That's the difference between seduction and manipulation. One creates mutual comfort, the other creates hidden pressure. And women can feel the difference immediately. A lot of men believe attraction is about saying the perfect thing, the perfect line, the perfect flirt, the perfect move. But the older you get, the more you realize something deeper. People are starving for emotional honesty, for presence, for conversations where they don't feel judged, pressured, or handled. And ironically, when a woman feels emotionally safe with you, she often becomes more sensual, more playful, more open than you expected. Not because you manipulated her into it, because safety unlocks authenticity. Real intimacy is not created through pressure. It's created through permission. Permission to relax, permission to flirt, permission to be human. And when you become the kind of man who can create that emotional environment, your dating life changes permanently. Because women stop feeling like they're being approached by another guy trying to get sex and start feeling like they're talking to a man who actually understands connection. That energy is rare now, which is exactly why it's unforgettable. If this resonated with you, pay attention to your next first date, not just to what you say, but to the emotional atmosphere you create, because attraction is less about techniques and more about how people feel in your presence. And I want to ask you something. What instantly makes a conversation feel comfortable and magnetic to you? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And in the next video, we're going to break down something fascinating. Why emotionally unavailable people often create the strongest attraction, and how to stop confusing anxiety for chemistry. Until then, remember this: the strongest sexual energy is rarely loud. It's calm, grounded, and emotionally aware.